this is also another moment in history that maybe is slightly forgotten today, but very early on in the conflict, there was this discussion about whether to send fighter jets to Ukraine. And the Poles, they offered their MiG-29s.
That's right.
But they wanted to send them through Germany. And
in exchange for more American modern planes.
Yes, but in the end, the Germans, they weren't up for it, and it turned out that the Americans at that point were also not willing to.
That's right.
To send
missed
fighter jets.
Opportunity.
It was deemed to be escalatory, and this is something that has been going on ever since the war started. That at one point they take the decision that something is deemed escalatory. 6-7 months later,
they do it.
They send it anyway. So,
same thing with the tank, same thing with the ATACMS. Now F-16s we're getting. Now it's the ATACMS. Maybe it'll escalate all the way up to nuclear weapons. We'll see. I mean, I'm joking, but yeah, Sean was negotiating basically with the Polish prime minister. So you got to send the F-16s. He was just like he was really gung ho to get the F-16s. He was calling up rich people and lawyers. What do we do? And the lawyers were like, it's hard to send F-16s. You need American military guarantees and military export licenses and
Has he been back to Ukraine recently, or
yes,
that was mainly 2022?
No, he's been many times.
He's back and forth.
I was with him on, I believe, 3 of his trips. He did one without me on the 4th trip, which I didn't go on. He's been back in a couple of times to show the film to the presidential administration. They like it.
Yeah.
The film is premiering on September 18th on Paramount Plus. That's the streaming network of Paramount. It's a really good film.
And of course, also Sean, ever since the war started, he played an important role in showing up at numerous late night TV shows, even some political shows. For example, I think he was on Hannity, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. That scene is actually in the film.
Yeah.
He shakes hands with Sean Hannity, and he, it was very American. Like it was almost corny and cheesy, and how American it was.
But playing an important role in bringing awareness to the general American public by being on all of these TV shows and keeping light and the spotlight on it, so to say.
Sure.
If we look at the war, we are now more than a year and a half into it.
Sadly.
As somebody who has spent a lot of time in Ukraine, you have a lot of contacts there. Where do you think it's heading?
Oh, man. It's going to be a really tough winter. It's going to be really brutal. I just saw the former National Security Advisor a month ago, and he actually joined the army. He's out of politics. He's just running around with drones and in fatigues. He was in a wheelchair last time I saw him. Got wounded twice and was walking on a cane. And he said to me, "Yeah, we're not ready for this winter." I think the Russians did the preemptory work of destroying the Ukrainian infrastructure last winter. They really did a good job of blowing up 50% of the transistors and the electrical pylons, right? They didn't rebuild them. They were able to keep the electricity on because of Soviet redundancy and capacity, right? But this year, this winter is going to be more brutal, and Putin's going to escalate. Before this is going to be over, and I hope it will be over soon, it's going to be worse. And before a coup d'etat or God intervenes or a heart attack or something happens, this is going to be a brutal affair that will last until spring, I think.
You mentioned the coup d'etat here as well.
Yeah.
Knowing the Russian mentality and having had a lot of contacts with Russians growing up.
Sure.
There are these people who say that, for example, during Afghanistan, during the first Chechen war, you had these movements, the grieving mothers, for example, that would be out protesting on the streets. In 1917, when the First World War was going very poorly, there was the revolution. Is there a chance that somebody will rise up in Russia if this war goes poorly enough for the Russian army?
Well, it already happened once with Prigozhin. It already happened once. It's absolutely possible. It's happened multiple times in Russian history. Russians do lose wars all the time. Russia has lost multiple wars. The Crimean War, the Russo-Japanese War.
The Polish Bolshevik War.
The Polish Bolshevik War, 1920, right? Here in Warsaw. The Afghan War was a Soviet loss. The Russians lose wars all the time. Sometimes they lead to political catastrophes. Sometimes they don't. Historically, you do have peasant and bunda uprisings in Russia.
Pugachevs.
Yeah.
Other figures.
But it's always historically, it's always elite coup d'états that usually, I mean, with the exception of 1917, where a revolution from below changed the government.
Yeah.
Historically, there's no transition mechanism in Russia or the Soviet Union or the Russian Empire. There's always part of their big problem, right? And Putin kind of is very well aware of this, and he was tinkering with ways to deal with this 4 or 5 years ago, but it's way too late for it now. I do believe that he's going to cling till the end now because he's a marked man now. He's going to The Hague. He's out on his way to The Hague or in a casket, right? Or at gunpoint.
Yeah, he can't even travel to South Africa for a BRICS summit.
Can't even travel to South Africa for a BRICS summit. So like he has 3 exits now: coup d'état at gunpoint, The Hague, or in a funeral wreath, right? A casket. Best case scenario. I mean, like I'm not the creator, so it's not. I'm not the master clockmaker, so it's not my will to say I wish a death on someone. Although I do actually. He's created a lot of death for a lot of people that I know.
Yeah.
I mean, best case scenario would be a heart attack 30 minutes from now.
Well, he's a quite old man.
He's old, but he has he's some of the best doctors in the world, and second best case scenario is because everyone was saying there's going to be a coup d'état, the Russian people are going to rise up. None of that happened. The Russian people are willing to tolerate this as long as it doesn't alter their lifestyle or it doesn't get in their way directly. The Russian people are willing to tolerate 100,000 casualties, and they know. I think they all know, and they don't care. Best case scenario at this point, if it's not going to be a God-made incident or a health-made incident, is that the oligarchic class, Patrushev, gets together and they say, "Look,
this is too expensive for
my lifestyle, my villa, my mistress,
vacations in Cannes,
my vacations in Cannes, my house in Cannes, my townhouse in London, my girlfriend in Monaco." Just cut it out already and stand down. Just don't go for the elections next year. Sadly, that's actually the most likely outcome for this. Unless the Ukrainians really, really, really do well and the Russians...
There is some form of collapse at some point, at some part of the front lines.
Yeah, I mean, that's entirely possible. I don't believe that the Russian Federation will collapse. There are a lot of Ukrainians hoping for that at the beginning of this conflict. That also, in retrospect, seems like wishful thinking. Collapse of the lines, absolutely possible.
Yeah, they're stretched quite thin. We've discussed the Ukrainian perspective, the Russian here with the Russian mentality. A lot of the war also depends on the US, and you have elections coming up next year. What is the general atmosphere? You hear a lot about people, at least in the Republican Party or the Republican bases, being slightly tired of military aid packages to Ukraine. But at the same time, when you look at the political elite, it does seem to be quite bipartisan, whether it's in the House or in the Senate.
Yes.
There are a lot of mainstream Republicans out there that seem quite determined.
For the most part, yeah.
What do you think? Where is this going? The general atmosphere, the general feelings among the American public, and especially with the elections next year?
We have to see how well the counteroffensive goes. I mean, if it goes really badly or it really stalls, there really are no results until the next counteroffensive, until the autumn or something, then that's not going to be great for public polling. The Republicans, they're countervailing examples. They're really good people, conservatives, Republicans, NatCon conservatives who are really in favor of helping our Ukrainian brothers and sisters. There is a sector of the party that really sees this as a heuristic for fighting back against elite consensus that they don't like. There are a lot of people in America who are saying, hey, government is not looking after me. Why are we looking after other people far away? It's hard to explain to those people that for $75 billion, you've just neutered half the military capacity of your largest, most powerful revisionist opponent with not a single American soldier dying. It's hard to make that case, and they're suffering, or they feel that they're suffering, and they don't really care about that. And typically they come out of military families and they just got pulled out of Afghanistan, their cousin or their daughter or their brother did, or their girlfriend did. And so, you have to have their own people, which is to say Republicans, conservatives, red state Americans, explain that to them.
Mm-hmm.
And we have those kinds of people. There was a great article in Politico about the gentleman, Mr. Stephen Moore, who's very impressive, a former whip for Congressman McCarthy. I was just on the phone with this gentleman yesterday. He's doing fantastic work. And there are a lot of Americans running around Ukraine right now doing very good philanthropic work. And a lot of these people are linked to churches.
Yeah.
And they're linked to the conservative part of America, the more traditional part of America. So I don't see those arguments as fatal yet.
Mm-hmm.
And the election's a year away.
Yeah.
I mean, a
Still
lot
quite
can
early. Yeah.
a lot can happen in a year. I mean, if you're Putin, would you really gamble your entire life on an election that's going to happen in a year when you're running out of time on the clock and the Ukrainians are doing better and better and better, and you're doing worse and worse and worse? So it used to be that the clock was against the Ukrainians. I think 6 months ago we were playing against the clock, and now I think the Kremlin's playing against the clock, which is good.
Mm-hmm. Also, we've discussed now the American part, the Russian, the Ukrainian. But since we're recording this in Poland and you're traveling a lot in and out of Poland on your way to Ukraine, Poland has played also an important role since the start of the war here. What do you hear from fellow Ukrainians when it comes to Polish-Ukrainian relations? Is there the fact that more than 1 million Ukrainians sought shelter and received it here in Poland? Has this information about 335 Polish tanks being sent to Ukraine?
People know.
Has this,
First of all, a lot of Ukrainian women, not men for the obvious reason, have passed through Poland, and a lot of Ukrainians are just settled here, just a lot. Like I think everyone knows someone here. My wife was just telling me about her producer, a lawyer producer, actually accountant producer on one of her film projects. In fact, my wife was just, as we were having lunch, was just on her way to see a Polish producer for a Polish-Ukrainian film co-production, and one of her girlfriends who worked on the film came here to stay, and the two Ukrainian kids, after a year, are fluent in Polish and don't want to leave their little Polish school friends. I think literally half to 60% of the Ukrainians who have left for Germany and Poland are going to wind up staying here. A year and a half is a long time. Nothing as permanent as a temporary solution, as the saying goes. Mm-hmm. There is tremendous goodwill between Ukrainians and Poles. Tremendous. The Ukrainian government understands full well that they have, other than the Latvians and the Lithuanians, no closer ally, and perhaps the Brits, in Europe than the Poles. Polish help has been absolutely critical. Poland is where we get all the military stuff coming in from. Poland has been incredibly important in shoring up political support, in shoring up military support, in shoring up humanitarian support, and the sheer number of Ukrainians who have passed through here, in and out. It's almost impossible to buy train tickets, right? It's really, really, really difficult to get a train ticket on the Kiev to Warsaw train. Really difficult. I had my assistant spend every morning for 3 weeks trying to get a ticket, and the people were buying up the tickets and reselling them, and I had to find tickets. It's really difficult. For like 200 seats, there are 10,000 requests for every train ticket between Warsaw and Kiev, and there's really, for technical reasons, no way to get more of those trains. So just the commerce, just the number of people moving back and forth between Ukraine and Poland is huge, and the fact that Warsaw has now become probably for forever, will play out over generations now, a Ukrainian diaspora city where 15 to 20% of a population are Russian or Ukrainian speakers. Everywhere I walk in the street of Warsaw, I hear Russian and Ukrainian everywhere. And I'm not exaggerating, am I?
No, absolutely not. As you mentioned, there's a ton of Ukrainians, but also we have Belarusians that fled after 2020.
Yeah.
We have more and more Moldovans moving to Poland and Warsaw especially, and also from Central Asia, various countries in Central Asia.
Yeah.
So it truly is.
As a Tashkent-born Ukrainian, I meet Uzbek Uber drivers in Warsaw continuously. So yeah, I mean, Warsaw has become a very much a cosmopolitan city in a way that it probably hasn't been since the 1950s in many ways, which is good, of course. It's very interesting. The city has changed a lot for the better in the last 25 years, but this has really changed the city a lot. Whether you are capable, by you I mean the Poles are capable of keeping up your graciousness and generosity in the long term is up to you. I don't know if that's going to happen, but it really, really has changed a lot. And the graciousness and gratefulness on the Ukrainian side, I think, will counteract whatever was left of lingering diplomatic or social stuff left over from
difficult problems from the 1930s and 40s.
That's right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I'm afraid we'll have to end it here since you're about to head straight to Ukraine.
That's right.
And
thank you so much.
There simply won't be any time to continue, but hopefully in the future when you'll be coming through Warsaw again, we can hopefully pick up the conversation where we left off. So thank you very much for coming this time.
Thank you so much.